George, yet unidentified gunmen wielding assault weapons assassinated Haitian President Jovenel Moïse early Wednesday morning, pushing one of the Western Hemisphere's poorest nations deeper into its protracted political crisis. Earlier this year, of course, Haiti was rocked by mass anti-government protests, with thousands taking to the streets in February to challenge the legitimacy of Moïse's presidency. My question broadly for you, George, and it's a loaded one. As someone who has worked on Haiti for quite some time, where does Haiti go from here, and what role might the international community play in the coming days and weeks?
Thank you, Guy. I think maybe the best way to address this question is to subdivide into three quick sort of sections. One is, does this event, which is tragic, what does that mean for the stability of the country? And I think the short answer there, as you alluded to in your question, is that the country has been going through a political and constitutional turmoil since the fall of last year, with now disputed national elections and a constitutional referendum been delayed several times and now scheduled for September the 26th of this year. The uncertainty about this calendar is now even greater about the mechanics, not only of the elections, but actually the political environment and, frankly, insecurity, whether any of this is actually now feasible. And the short answer, in effect, is unless there is a consensus that emerges fairly quickly among Haiti's rather divided political factions and the government, if that does not emerge quickly, then matters could unravel even more and even more rapidly. There's maybe a second issue, which is the actual credibility of the interim sort of leadership that comes out of this tragic event. And there again, there are sort of odd twists and turns to the story, because the interim prime minister, Claude Joseph, who's actually the foreign minister, is now technically running the country, but he's doing so under some uncertainty about what his real authority and legitimacy is. And that is because under normal circumstances, it would be the head of the judiciary who would be an interim president under these circumstances. However, that individual died of COVID-19 back in June. So in effect, the process is likely to come by default back to the interim prime minister. But even there is an additional twist, which is that Claude Joseph himself was to be replaced by a new nominee, which had been announced on Monday by Jovenel Moïse, a gentleman named Claude Henry. But his term, if you will, his role as prime minister, interim prime minister, he's not been sworn in yet. So there are a lot of questions in some ways that arise almost immediately about the legitimacy of whoever ultimately is going to act in an interim capacity. And I think that raises some important questions. Thirdly, and finally, the international community comes in. I think it has, in the short run, maybe two important roles to play. One of them, and it's particularly true for the United States and other key actors, maybe like Canada, the Dominican Republic, other actors who have intimate knowledge, if you will, in the internal dynamics and activities that go on within Haiti. And that is that these actors should try to ensure that those that are behind the assassination of Jovenel Moïse are actually identified and ultimately caught. Because clearly this incident did not happen with only Haitian resources. There's some international connection which has to be identified and has to emerge. And I think this is an important role that the United States and other actors could play in the short run. And secondly, I think this was an issue even before this tragic event, but it's likely now even more important, which is both international governments, international organizations, to some degree, international civil society should try to encourage as much as possible Haiti's divided political opposition to come to some consensus set of practical, credible proposals that they could interact with whether it's Claude Joseph or someone else on an interim basis, the interim government, to actually push the process forward to some sort of an agreeable pathway forward. I'm not even sure what the timetable is to this, but it's got to be done fairly quickly. I mean, this has been a divided country now, and without trying to blame the finger on one side or the other, this is actually a time where the international community could encourage, maybe even gently pressure Haiti's various political factions and the government to come together under some sort of a consensus arrangement out of the crisis. I think that would be sort of my assessment in the short run until we know more about the crisis. Thanks.